Hi everybody, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you guys the process of me making this knit cardigan. Everything is knit flat. It consists of 5 pieces and I use the twisted rib stitch. So for this stitch, it's the same thing as knit one, purl one, except we're working through the back loop, which I think makes things look a little bit more neater, honestly. So to get started, usually we knit like this, but we're actually going through the back loop, not the front loop. And then now you're going to yarn over, and usually when we purl we go through the front loop like this, but we are not going to do that. We are actually going to bring our needle towards the back of the stitch and try and get it into that back loop. It's a little bit awkward and it does feel super tight at first, but this is, I think, what makes the stitch look so neat, because everything is kind of, you know, and we're working through the back loop, so it kind of makes things a little bit, I don't know, tighter, and I feel like it makes it look neater. So here I'm just showing you guys another run through. So I feel like the purl is the one that's kind of more tricky. It's just literally going through this back loop and then purling as usual. And that's really all that it is for the twisted rib stitch. It's basically same thing, knit one, purl one. It doesn't matter how many stitches you cast on. The only difference is that you're just going through the back loop. So yeah, that's about it for the twisted rib stitch. Still super stretchy, still nice to look at. And now let's go ahead and move on to the materials that I used in this project. For yarn, I'm using Lion Brand Basic Stitch Anti-Pilling yarn and ended up only needing 2 balls of yarn for this project. For the needles, I'm using these 4mm circular needles. You could use straight needles though, since everything is knit in flat. Also, I have a tape measure here so that I can take the measurements from my daughter. So I have some more materials here that I used, including this foam mat that I took from my kids' room. I use this for blocking my work. Usually I don't block. I feel like it's kind of a preferential thing, but for this project I did want to. I also have that long plastic ruler in the back, mainly because I kept losing my tape measure throughout the whole process. And then if you do decide to block, you're of course going to need some needles. And then to seam the pieces together, I honestly used a crochet hook. I'm sure a tapestry needle would have been a lot easier, but I don't know where that's at. So I just use whatever I have on hand. And then of course you're going to need scissors throughout the whole project. So here I'm just showing you guys the body measurements that I took. They are not the finished measurements, but these are going to be used as a guide to figure out how wide, how long to make my pieces, because I'm keeping in mind that, you know, she is going to probably wear like a light long sleeve underneath. Also, I want to make sure it's comfortable enough for her. Another thing that it's helpful for is for gauge. So once you figure out your gauge, you're going to be using the measurements along with that to kind of work up your pieces and kind of make sense of everything. But yeah, that's about as far as any prep work goes for this project. After I was done with all of that, I started working on the back piece by casting on 68 stitches, and then I worked up for 60 rows. Once I got to that 60th row, I started shaping the neckline. So for the neckline, what I did was I worked the pattern for these first 22 stitches, and then I binded off the next 24 stitches, and then I continued working that pattern for the last 22 stitches. So here I'm just showing you again that these are the 22 stitches, the 24 that I binded off, and then the last 22 that I continued to knit. So now that I reached the end of this row, I'm going to continue working the pattern until I get the length that I need, which is 11 inches. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to attach new yarn to the other side and do the same thing. So I only needed to knit 4 rows to get to 11 inches. So on the 5th row, I went ahead and binded it off. Since everything looks good, I'm gonna go ahead and start moving on to the other side. Here you can kind of start seeing the neckline being shaped a bit. So once we get to the other side, we're doing the same exact thing, and then we're just about done with the back piece. So for the front panels, I made 2 and casted on 30 stitches. After row 52, I started to decrease 1 stitch on one side until I had 22 stitches on my needle, and continued to work the pattern until I had a total of 66 rows. So for the decreases, I did either a knit 2 together or a slip slip knit. For slip slip knit, I believe it makes the stitch lean left, and then for the knit 2 together, it makes it lean right. I really have no idea if this changes anything as far as the way that it looks, but to me it just made sense. So depending on which side I was working, I would alternate between a slip slip knit or a knit 2 together. And then for the sleeves, I just made 2 and casted on 44 stitches and worked up until I had 58 rows. So after I was done knitting all my pieces, I went ahead and blocked them, and then this is what they look like all laid out. And now I'm going to start seaming everything together, starting at the shoulders. So whenever I was seaming everything together, I used the invisible seam stitch, which was a little bit tricky to figure out at first, but I do like the way that it ended up coming out. So for the sleeves, what I ended up doing was just basically dividing it to match up to the shoulder seam. So the sleeves had 44 stitches in total. I divided it with a little pink yarn into 22 equal parts, and then just kind of matched it along to that shoulder seam. And then whenever I was done attaching the sleeves, I went ahead and seamed everything together, and I actually went along the edges with a crochet hook, and I just did a single crochet. I just feel like it made it look a little bit more finished and neater. And then this is the final product. Alright guys, that's about as much as I have for this video. I hope you guys liked it. I'm gonna wrap it up here because Zoe is starting to be curious about what bark tastes like. So don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, blah, blah, blah. Hi Mom!
Parkour! Parkour! Ooh! Parkour! Parkour!
Whoa!
Parkour!
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not.